And we are live. So, welcome everyone who's joining. I'm excited today. I have with me Roy Ju and Mike Jennings. And Roy Ju was announced as the world's youngest FSA a few years back. And Mike Jennings has used a lot of his study tactics to become an FSA very quickly after he learned them. And the two of them co-authored a book. So we're going to talk a little about that, talk a little about their background. So thank you for joining, guys.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So let's just go ahead and start off with just an introduction. Roy, you could start off with a couple sentences about yourself, and then we'll jump to Mike after that.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having us, Paul. So, hey, Roy here. And I've been working as an actuary for about the last half decade. So I've worked at a couple companies, and currently I'm working within the life and annuities area, leading some actuarial and data science functions.
Awesome. And Mike, yourself?
Yep. So I grew up in the Chicago area originally, went to Drake University where I graduated. That's where I met Roy. We can talk a little bit more about that shortly. After graduating in 2015, ever since then, been working full-time as an actuary, first with group disability products and now with pension products in Hong Kong.
Nice. So you guys both went to Drake, and we were talking a little bit before this started, but Drake is a fairly big actuarial university. Did you know about their actuarial program before going into it, and that was like a school you specifically wanted to go to?
Yeah, I knew about the program going in. I think it was about my junior year of high school. I was looking at what I wanted to do for a living, and maybe this is how many others found their profession, but I knew I liked math. I liked my accounting class, so I was looking up jobs that combined math and business, and then of course that paid well.
Yep.
So that's how I found actuarial on the list of recommended jobs, and then just from there went to the SOI website to look at the Centers of Actuarial Excellence. Found Drake University, visited, and ended up loving it.
Nice. And then for yourself, Roy, I know you may be a little tired of hearing world's youngest FSA, but knowing that you got your FSA so young, um, like, did you aspire to be an actuary from a young age? And did you kind of start this whole exam process before going to Drake?
Yeah, Paul, that's a good question. I think my answer will probably surprise a lot of people. So initially, after I graduated high school, I was pretty sure I wanted to work on Wall Street and was pretty much set on attending a university on the East Coast.
Okay.
Last minute, my parents really pushed my brother, my twin brother, as well as myself to stay close to home. So more specifically within the Midwest. And kind of tough to work on Wall Street if you're constrained in the Midwest. So did a little bit of research and thought, okay, actuarial could be a really good option. And there are a lot of great insurance companies, a lot of great universities within Iowa where I grew up. So it was just perfect.
Nice. Okay, that's interesting. So then when did you actually start taking the exam? So from the time you started to the time you finished, how many years was that?
Yeah, I believe I started when I was maybe a junior in high school. So I was probably about 16. And from there, just gradually took the exams up until age 20.
Nice. Okay. Because I'm trying to think. So if you started with the first exam, I mean, you had to have some background in probability, some background in calculus. Are these all things that you had taken before age 16, or did you start learning this at age 16?
Yeah, I was fortunate. When I was a young child, my dad really pushed me to, study up on math and taught me some advanced math at a younger age. And so I was able to finish all my calculus classes in junior high. So, inevitably I ran
Oh
into
my goodness. Junior high.
so ran out of classes to take. I was taking a lot of calculus classes, your linear algebra, whatever other advanced math classes at the local university. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, I want to do more math and
Nice.
so
Well, the exams are a good way to take more math. So,
that's right.
And Roy,
that,
is it true that you started learning about financial derivatives in like sixth through eighth grade? Is that when you started researching those for fun?
Yeah, I was always kind of weird growing up. I was interested in a lot of boring topics. And so kind of, oh, wait, no, I mean, I kind of heard through the grapevine that the world was falling apart during the recession. And so I was naturally pretty curious. And so I studied and learned all about the drivers of the financial recession. And that just grew into a passion to learn more about finance. And actually, Mike, that is the reason why I was really set on working on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, you don't have to apologize to us because I mean, we're all people that are interested in weird subjects. So I think you just started younger than maybe some people. uh, yeah, because I remember when I was a kid, I sometimes tell this story that like I was definitely not learning calculus, but I was good at math. And my dad used to I really liked Oreos, so I'd ask if I could have more Oreos, and my dad would ask me a math question. He'd be like, "You can have another Oreo if you answer this math question." I'd be like, "Okay." So I was pretty motivated to do well at math at that point. But that was like I think multiplication, simple questions at the time.
What a great system.
Yeah, it was a reward system there. So
Yeah, Oreos, I really can't think of a better incentive than that.
I agree, especially double stuff Oreos. Those are my favorite.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But Mike, yourself. So I'm curious, how did you originally meet Roy?
Well, around Drake's campus, I was 2 years ahead of him coming into school. So when we heard that there was a freshman coming in that had 3 exams passed, everyone knew his name already, as you can imagine. A lot of rumors flying around. But I think we first actually met for an event for an actuarial science fraternity, Gamma Iota Sigma, on campus. So Roy was coming in and I think interviewing for the fraternity. We interviewed together. Obviously had the same interest in actuarial, but then we ended up hitting it off on many other levels. We both really enjoyed fitness and nutrition. We both enjoyed competitive eating. So we'd go to the dining hall. Oh, yeah. Roy would down like 12 plates of food in the dining hall. I'd try to keep up.
Impressive.
Oh, yeah. I've never seen anyone eat as much as Roy. So that's definitely a hidden talent he has.
I actually secretly have a hidden talent in eating as well, so we'll have to have a competition sometime.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, Mike and I were recently in Dominican Republic actually for our annual strategy meeting for the book and the company. And of course, we picked an all-inclusive in Dominican Republic. And so
of course,
I think that gave Mike plenty of context for what he's describing now.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I think each night, so restaurants opened about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Roy ate like 10 to 12 entrees each night.
Are you serious?
5 or 6 appetizers.
Dude, how are you going to keep
desserts.
that up? I mean, you don't look like you eat that much.
Well, I don't know. Everybody says it's some kind of super fast metabolism. I live a relatively sedentary lifestyle, so I hope at some point it doesn't just like fall off of a cliff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're doing good for now. So I'm curious to back up. Mike, you met Roy, and then you learned. Rumor has it you learned some of his study tactics, and after maybe a little bit of an exam drought, maybe you could explain it to us. You started passing exams fairly quickly after that. Is that true?
Yeah, I think this really started. I remember one conversation in particular. I was working in the weight room on campus. Roy was coming in, and I was studying for exam MLC, so now LTAM or
Yep.
LTAM. And I was going through my study manual, and I knew he had just passed it. So I asked how he studied for the exam. And I think he made an offhand comment of like, oh, I would read through the practice problems for every third section and so on. And I was like, wait, what? Why you were skipping sections? Like, how did this work with you skipping the reading and going right to practice problems?
Yeah.
So it was very unconventional. I was intrigued. And that sitting, I didn't apply any of those methods. That was when I actually failed MLC. And I took about a year off from studying for exams. And that was the time when I really started drilling Roy more about how he studied. I started reading other books about learning how to learn, and I saw a lot of parallels. So I came back, renewed energy, renewed strategy, and my trajectory from there was I passed exam C the next February. MLC a few months after, and then went right into the modules, finished those up, and found that the strategies worked even better on the fellowship exams.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So how quickly from the time you actually implemented those strategies to the time you became an FSA, like what was the time frame?
It was 2.5 years from coming back after the 1 year drought to finishing up the two prelims, the modules, and then the FSA exams.
That's amazing. I mean, because I know a lot of people that will get stuck on certain exams, or they'll kind of have that drought. And I feel like momentum is a big thing, whether it's negative or positive. And when you have that negative momentum, like when you get stuck on something, I feel like this is a huge encouraging thing for people to hear about. That like you could be stuck on something and just change your habits, or change the way you study, or something like that, and it can
Sure.
actually change everything. So like, do you feel like do you feel like I mean, obviously there's a certain mathematical ability that's there, there's a certain background maybe you need to have, but um do you feel like a lot of it comes down to your study habits?
I think a lot more than people expect. So at least when I was studying for exams, people didn't really talk about how you study. It's largely an activity you do in isolation, right? So you
Yeah.
don't see how someone else actually reads through the study manual compared to how you do. You just talk about, oh, I did 10 practice problems, 50 practice problems today, but you
Yep.
don't see the mental process behind it. And that's why I was lucky when I really started drilling Roy on the questions. He put up with them for a while, and I gained a lot of insight into the cognitive process. And some of the things I was doing were just a waste of time.
Yeah.
And so when you reallocate the energy into methods that actually work, it's amazing the results that you can produce. But yeah, to add some more color on that exam drought, I definitely had the doubts that I imagine most people are familiar with. If you fail an exam, you start questioning the career path. Do I have what it takes to come back from this? Do I even want to come back from this? Because
Yes.
several more exams down the line, hundreds of more study hours. And kind of the deal I made with myself was that if I was going to come back and do it, I was going to change my approach. I wasn't going to put in the 300 hours per exam or the 100-hour
Yep.
rule for studying. I was going to do things differently, and just decided to try it out, and it worked. So
That's
that's
pretty
how I got
amazing.
here.
So for yourself, Roy, these study tactics that you developed, is this something that came naturally to you, or is it something that once you got your FSA, you look back in hindsight and you're like, "Oh, that worked really well." I'm curious if you proactively developed these
Yeah,
tactics.
that's a good question, Paul. I think it all was more or less driven from a natural desire on my end to maybe take shortcuts or just shorten the amount of time it takes to do anything in life. And I
Hmm.
feel like growing up, junior high, high school, I played very competitive tennis and I played soccer and all these other activities. And my time was limited, but I knew academics were very important. So even studying in junior high, high school, I would more or less work backwards and figure out what's important for me to do well on exams, because doing well on exams equated to a good GPA. And I found myself, scoring very well in academics without necessarily spending, time reading through textbooks multiple times, things like that, because I had more of a targeted approach to figuring out what was important and hitting the key points
Yeah.
when I'm reading through material.
Oh, that's amazing.
Mhm.
So, in terms of like both of your guys' background, Roy, we'll start with you. What did you study in school that you felt like prepared you the most for going into the actuarial profession? I mean, it sounds like you went to Drake and majored in actuarial science. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. I formerly studied finance and economics,
Okay.
but I took many actuarial classes and had very good relationship with a lot of the actuarial professors. Led some actuarial organizations while I was on campus as well. But actually, I did not formally study actuarial. Interestingly enough, I've been asked that question a few times, and I almost feel like um, psychology, and I think I took one or two psychology classes and read a lot of psychology on the side. That I personally feel was most impactful to the work I currently do. as I think just understanding how people tick and how
Yes.
people work and optimizing teams, really is second to none in terms of, being a valuable skill set.
I 100% believe that. I mean, I didn't specifically study psychology. I took one psychology class, but having been in the profession for a while, I feel like the exams are important. This is my opinion, by the way. I'm prefacing this. This is completely my opinion, but I think the exams are important to think a certain way as an actuary. And some of the concepts are directly applicable to work. Having said that, I would say that most days, at least for myself, I wasn't necessarily going and creating a bunch of probability distributions or going and calculating financial derivatives or things like that. Um, but I feel like it was kind of a mindset that, like, if you're motivated and you're a certain type of worker, you're going to do well. But there isn't necessarily a one-to-one correlation between doing well on exams and doing well at work. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, Mike, yourself, what was your educational background? It sounds like you majored in actuarial science. Is that right?
I did, and I started off double majoring in accounting and actuarial science. Um, Later, I don't know, I wasn't as interested in the accounting classes. I ended up dropping that major and just taking philosophy classes.
Okay.
So very different outside the business school. But I actually found those more beneficial than any of my business classes. And really, when it came to exams, philosophy classes taught you more how to think. Whereas for my business classes, it was more, memorizing certain rules and just rote memorization.
Right.
So that happens a lot on exams. And maybe to your point about exam success not translating to the workplace, I think that happens a lot when someone does a high volume of practice problems, which is helpful. But then if you just memorize formulas rather than understanding the first principles, why they were derived the way they
Hmm.
are, you can't really translate that into business results. So philosophy was great to prime my mindset, actually get you to develop critical thinking rather than just memorizing and applying rules.
Interesting. So for Roy, psychology, for Mike, for you, it's the philosophy that you feel like you needed the mathematical background, but those were the classes that you felt like really helped you think in a new way.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So what was the inspiration to we kind of got your background, you guys met, Mike, you used these study tactics. What was the inspiration to write the book? Was it, whoa, I actually implemented these and it worked. Let's write a book. Like how did that process get started? We'll start with you,
Yeah.
Roy.
Yeah, Paul, it's interesting. So after the SOA had announced that I had broken the world record, they had actually included my personal email address at the bottom of the news release.
Uh-oh.
Funny enough, I was not expecting that, but I guess it was a blessing and a curse at the same time. I
Yeah,
would say for a month or two, I was answering emails probably about 2 to 3 hours a day, or at least every other day, about 2 to 3 hours. Folks just saying, "Hey, congrats," and of course, a pleasant thank you back, or "Hey, can you give me some advice? I'm studying for exams," or
right.
"Hey, I'm actuarial, but I'm nervous about these." Whatever, anything under the sun. I think a couple people even. I think I was challenged to a taco eating contest, and I probably got several dozen resumes. It was just everything under the sun.
Wow.
Yeah, but one common theme was always, okay, can you give some study advice? And I wanted to make sure I gave a decent answer for every person that took the time to reach out. And by the time, a couple of months passed, I thought, okay, yeah, I've been doing this quite a bit. And Mike and I, just being friends, we kept talking, and Mike was just feverishly making progress to his FSA at pretty much lightning speed, and had more or less reinforced in my head that there was some merit to the study strategies and that they
Hmm.
were and just very effective. And so probably over the course of the year, it's always been like maybe it could be interesting to actually write a book like everybody's trying to encourage me to do. And eventually, Mike and I sat down one summer and we just thought, you know what? Why don't we just give it a try? Neither of us are authors, but how about we tag team this and write a book, and the rest is history.
That's pretty amazing. So if an actuary were to pick up this book and go through it, how, like, for the time that they invest in reading this book, how much time would you estimate that they could potentially save over the lifetime of exams by implementing some of these techniques? Maybe we'll start with you, Mike.
All right, I'll start answering, and Roy, you do the math calculations. But the earlier
Just
that you
like a
get it,
high level estimate.
sure, sure. But the earlier you get the book, definitely the longer the payoff, right? And
Mhm.
in terms of the investment, I think most people read it in about 2 hours or less.
Okay.
So our goal with it was really to keep it compact. We weren't trying to write a 250-page book filled with a bunch of stories and fluff. We just get to the point. So 2 hours time investment, and then you kind of compound that over each exam, right? You keep improving on your study methods each time. I don't know, for myself, what that resulted in was for my last fellowship exam, instead of studying like 400 to 500 hours, it was 176. And it's so specific because I was timing all my study sessions
Wow, that's
to see
amazing. Yeah.
what it would be. Roy, do you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, as I look about how much time I spent preparing it, in a lot of cases was probably about a fraction of a lot of my classmates. And that always worried me because I went to exams thinking, okay, I spent, quarter as much time as the SOA is recommending, things like that. I'm doomed to fail.
Yeah.
But going to every exam, I thought I know my stuff. And so I feel like I should pass at the same time. And I always, eventually ended up passing despite being so nervous. And as Mike said, I have no doubt that folks can save, half to even 2/3 the amount of time that they traditionally study. So that's 100 to 200 hours per exam, maybe even a little bit more for fellowship exams.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, I think that that's a valuable, I mean, that would be a very worthwhile 2 hour investment to go through and read that book. That's what I would think. I mean, if I were to go back in time and, retake exams, I would definitely do something like that because, I mean, I even think back and it's like, I had that rule in my head of, 100 hours of study per exam hour. I don't know where that came from, but that's kind of out there. And it varies so much per person is the thing. Cause like, one person may have a heavy background in statistics or probability, and the other person may have no background and they may need to learn some of that for each particular exam. So it can totally vary per person, but I feel like that rule has been kind of stuck in so many of our heads just because everyone talks about it.
Absolutely. And I think it serves a good purpose initially. It gets you thinking like, okay, my actuarial exam takes a little more effort than any of my college classes. It's
Yeah.
something unlike what I've done before, and it really drills that home. But then what has happened, at least in my opinion, over time, is that it gets people to focus too much on quantity and not enough on quality.
Yes.
So then if you fail an exam, you just think, oh, I just need to add more hours. And there's no doubt a correlation, right? More time you spend studying,
Yep.
the more likely to pass. But what you do during that time
Well,
really matters.
that's what I was gonna say because, like, you talk to even students at school. It's like, oh, I studied all night for this test. Well, then you have to back up and say, well, why did you study all night? What were you doing? Days beforehand. What were you doing? Were you sitting there just twiddling your thumbs? Were you, like, at least for me, when I procrastinate, I get distracted a lot. Like, so that's your point of quality of
Absolutely.
time. So
And the one thing I don't want to do, and the name of the book, I don't know if I've mentioned it, but Actuarial Exam Tactics. Um, the one thing I don't want to do is to paint it as a magic pill solution.
right.
No matter what, actuarial exams are tough and it takes a lot of time and
Hmm.
effort, but it helps you make sure that those efforts are actually paying off.
Hmm.
So they're going into methods that work as
I
opposed to
mean,
just
that sounds kind of like
reinventing the wheel.
fitness. I feel like everyone wants a magic pill and they want to get super buff, but in reality, it takes a lot of work. But you can change your strategies and be more efficient with it. Same sort of deal.
Absolutely.
That's a good analogy, Paul. And I was even thinking a sports athlete. So somebody who wants to be an absolute all-star in a certain sport, they need to have some kind of baseline potential. They need to be able to run, jump, swim, whatever at a capacity. But then from there, it's work ethic, focus, and even having the right coaches and having the right mentors to help direct them in the right direction. And I see the book as serving more as a guide and coach in that regard. So of course you need to put in the work, and what you put in is what you get out.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think a lot of folks start actuarial exams and just assume, okay, I have this big study manual. I need to go start to finish and maybe do that 2 to 3 times. And what we're really trying to do is help people strategize how they approach their study.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm curious, can you give us some sort of sneak peek into those tactics, or do you want to wait until people read it?
Yeah, I'll maybe share one story in terms of how one of the tactics came about, and I think it's one of the most powerful and easiest to adhere to.
Okay.
So I had a couple rules, Paul. I've always been very into NFL football, and so every Sunday I watched fantasy football all day. Watch every single football game and did not do anything except eat pizza, wings, and whatever.
That's awesome.
And that's always been a rule for myself. And so even going through exams, Sunday was never a day I could ever study, because I would try to study maybe for 20 minutes during the game, and I just realized I wasn't getting anywhere.
Yep.
So one of the book's principles is more or less study whenever it's conducive for your life, and split up your study session. So I think a lot of folks might study 5-10 hours straight. And in my case, I probably lost attention within the first 45 minutes to an hour. And so I realized, if I did 2 or 3 30 or 45-minute sessions, that would go a lot farther than 1 5-hour session, just in terms of quality of study. And I felt like, fantasy football is one example, but I had so many other things going on in my life that going back and forth, I didn't want to feel burdened with having to set aside, an entire half day to study. So it worked better with my life, and also made each study hour a lot more quality by kind of interspersing space and activities.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think it's important to also kind of have a reward for yourself. Like, for example, the Sunday football. If you lost that, then it's like, what do you want something to look forward to,
Absolutely. As a joke, I always eat a pretty big dinner, and after dinner, I was always a little bit sleepy and not wanting to do anything. So that was another one of my rules. Study in the morning, study in the afternoon. But right when I get to dinner's the reward, and I'm gonna relax the rest of the night.
That's awesome. I like it. Yeah, I was like, for me, I think I implemented some of those strategies, without knowing that strategy. But I would do that with like fitness, for example. Is like, if I didn't get up and move around or do something active, I would go crazy. So it was like, that was the reward. Or even I was talking to the president of Actus on here. I was telling him this a little bit. Stephen Camille, I was telling him that when I would study, I would oftentimes go to coffee shops, and I wanted to make the whole experience enjoyable. So I really enjoyed having a coffee and a brownie. So I'd get my coffee and my brownie, and it made the whole experience fun to me. As nerdy as that sounds, it's like I have my coffee, I have my brownie, I'm studying this cool math, and I made it like this whole fun experience. So.
Oh, absolutely. And that's actually, we were talking a little bit before this, Paul, about the book originally came out 2 years ago, and June 11th is when the second edition of Actuarial Exam Tactics is coming out. And the difference between the first and second is exactly what you were talking about, in terms of, all right, now that you know what to do in terms of study habits, how do you adhere to it? Yeah. And that was the pillar that was really missing in the first one. So you have effectiveness, make sure you're doing the right things; efficiency, make sure you do them quickly, do them well; and then adherence, make sure you could stick to it. And that's the layout of the book. And that adherence pillar is what's new in the second edition.
That's awesome. And that actually leads to my next question. I was going to ask, when can actuaries buy this book, and where can they buy it? And it sounds like June 11th. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the launch date. And it's available at Actus. So you can find it on the Actus website. and that's our publisher for the book. You can find study materials there as well.
Nice.
But
I could put a link below this YouTube interview too to the book.
yeah, that'd be perfect.
Yep.
And Paul, I think if you if you check out the adherence section, it'll be funny how closely your coffee and brownie strategy parallels one of the concepts that we put in there about
Nice.
habit stacking. So
You know what's funny about that? The reason I brought it up is because I didn't know about this book, and I was telling Steven about it, and he's like, "That sounds like exactly one of the strategies that Roy and Mike have in their book." So,
yep.
um, so yeah, this one that worked well for me. Not that coffee and brownie are necessarily healthy, but they taste good. All right, so I think that kind of covers the main things that I wanted to talk about your background, about the book. I wanted to ask you a couple fun questions before the end, just to find out more about you guys, and in case anyone else is wondering. And we'll start with you, Roy. Do you read any books or listen to any podcasts? And if so, can you give us your favorite one or maybe top three?
Yeah, I do quite a lot of reading, but I'll admit it's usually not books. It's a lot of articles revolving venture capital, startups within the insurtech and fintech space. And it's just my way of trying to keep up with all the innovative technologies. With regard to actual books, I think probably the last couple books I've read were maybe your quote unquote good business books that a lot of folks would, that have had successful careers maybe have recommended.
Nice. How about yourself, Mike?
Yeah, favorite books. One of them, Paul, we were just talking about this before we went live, but The 4 Hour Work Week by
Yep.
Tim Ferriss. That was the first book that really got me thinking about how to be effective and treat time as a scarce resource, which it is, and to really value that, which influences the study strategy. And then recently, Atomic Habits by James Clear was also very good. And for students studying for exams, that's another one. If you're struggling, staying motivated and sticking to your schedule, that has helped me in the past as well.
That's awesome. And then favorite hobby outside of work. I've already heard a few mentioned related to eating and fitness. And you can say those again if you want, but we'll start with you, Roy.
Yeah, eating is first and foremost my favorite hobby. I will always consider it to be a hobby.
That's amazing.
A close second, or maybe farther second, I do enjoy golfing, and I also enjoy playing cards. So card games like bridge as well as euchre.
Awesome. How about yourself, Mike?
Weightlifting would be my first answer. In college, I trained
That's
for.
mine as well.
Okay,
Yep.
excellent. I was gonna say you look very fit and built yourself.
Thanks.
So
Well,
I figured you're.
I'm hiding myself. I'm like low on the.
But I was really into powerlifting for a period as well and competed towards the end of my college career.
Oh, awesome.
Now it's a bit more casual, but still like to keep up with it.
Were you on a team on Drake, or was it like a side team?
Yeah, we started a weightlifting club there, and then there was a few of us that were really interested in taking it to the next level, and we all signed up for a meet and trained for it together.
Very cool. That's awesome. So as everyone can see, actuaries, we do have some form of life. We are normal people. No, I really appreciate you guys coming on, Roy and Mike. Thank you so much. And anyone who's interested in this book, I think it's going to be well worth your time. Sounds like maybe a 2-hour read. I definitely would have done it myself, and it's fairly inexpensive. So I'll put the link below the YouTube channel. But thanks again for talking about it.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Paul.
Appreciate you having us, Paul.
Yeah, you're welcome. And for all my listeners, I have a great lineup of guests coming up, so stay tuned for more exciting actuarial topics, and we'll see you all next time. I'm out from Spokane, Washington. Mike is out from
Des Moines, Iowa right now.
Iowa currently, and Roy is out from
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. See you all next time.